A video from October 7th, just to kind of, so people understand exactly what happened that day. I'll let you comment on the other side. So obviously October 7th, over 1,200 Israeli civilians, for the most part, were killed by the hands of Hamas. The most Jews killed since the Holocaust. Let's roll a video of that. Do we have that here?
Oh, we don't have audio.
יש פה מישהו? יש לי פה שוטרת? יש לי שוטרת הרוגה פה?
I mean, I see it here, but I can't hear it.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here. And this Dave Smith versus Laura Loomer exchange has a genuinely interesting structure to it. The core debate is about collective responsibility. Whether a population that elects a government bears some responsibility for that government's actions, and whether that logic, if applied consistently, would also apply to American civilians, given the wars their own elected governments have launched. But there's also a specific factual claim in here, worth checking directly, a poll number attached to a named Hamas leader. I want to walk through both the philosophical argument and the factual check, because they're doing different work. Stick with me. Get that like in. Get subscribed, because we take the time to verify the specifics. Now let's get into it.
With the terrorists. So that was my point, and I think that point stands. In terms of, it's easy to wave this away and just say, well, it's not about killing babies, it's not about a land dispute, it's not about any of those things, because in Hamas's founding, charter, there are awful things in there. I mean, yeah, that just seems to be very convenient for somebody who doesn't want to actually grapple with the fact well, hold on, you had a long time to talk, so let me just speak to. The fact is that decent people who are looking at this situation will be concerned about killing innocent babies. Now, in terms of what you said about how do you differentiate Hamas from the Palestinian people, from the people in Gaza, from the people in the West Bank, well, Hamas is not an issue in the West Bank, and it's not as if they have their freedom there either. We can differentiate it as much as we can between differentiating Adam and Joe Biden. And the fact that Joe Biden was elected, and okay, you can give me stuff on that. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know what you Trump supporters say about the last election. But I'm just saying. Okay, won. So there you go.
Trump 2024.
Sure. And we can make those assertions. Sure. Anyway, but I will tell you that no matter who, the idea that if you voted for this government, which, by the way, when's the last time Gaza had an election? 2005?
2006.
And that's something we need to discuss.
Well, that's, I mean,
are they ever going to have another election again?
The vast majority of the population living there didn't vote for them. You can say that there was some polls taken. Fair enough. I mean, we could also go through what the Likud party has in their founding charter.
And I brought that, and I have that as well.
So fine, it's pretty ugly toward the Palestinians as well.
For those of you who don't know, the Likud party is Benjamin Netanyahu's party. That's more of a right-wing government in Israel.
The ruling party in Israel, yes. And so, look, but all of that is the logic that if you voted for your government, which I would argue that Hamas is not really a government, but if you argue that you voted for your government and therefore you're on the hook for the crimes of your government, well then congratulations, you have embraced the logic of Osama bin Laden.
That's not what I said, though.
No, I didn't say you said that. I'm saying if you're making that argument, that's the same argument that Osama bin Laden made. That, hey, you elected this government, so Americans, you're on the hook for it. And innocent American civilians, well, guess what? You're not innocent anymore because you elected this government that's done all these things to the Muslim world. I think for civilized people, what makes a lot more sense is to draw the line at a distinction between those who are initiating violence and those who are not. And that's why Hamas is wrong. That's why Hamas is even if they have a legitimate beef with the Israeli government, they're completely wrong to target civilians. And even if the Israeli government has a legitimate beef with Hamas, as they do, they have no excuse for just slaughtering innocent civilians. It's wrong, and there's no reason for us to accept that.
Fair point. One thing to you is, who do you place a certain amount of blame on who for this current war that's going on right now? Like, how would you place blame on this?
Well, there's a lot of blame to go around, right? So again, as I was saying, there's blame on anybody who's been violent toward innocent people. But if you want to like zoom out and look at the history of this situation, then yes, there's a whole lot of blame to go around. And the truth is that the Israeli government, say from its inception, and we could go even earlier than that, but in 1947, when the UN partition recommendation first came out, the Jewish Zionist settlers owned about 10% of the land, okay? And the UN recommended that they get 56% of the land. And so immediately, the Zionists accepted this agreement, and the Arabs said, no, we don't accept this recommendation from the UN, which, by the way, had no authority to just create nations out of nothing. And then there was a civil war broke out immediately. Other Arab countries intervened as well. And in this process, Israel won. And 750,000 Muslim Arabs were driven off of their land and never allowed to come back to their homes. And so Israel then took over 80%. When they were first recommended by the UN 56, which really they had no legitimate right to claim, but then they took over 80%. And then in 1960, well, hold on, let me just finish what I'm saying, and then you can go. Let me finish, and then you can jump in. Then, okay, this was in 1948. Then they declared their independence, right? Then in 1967, Israel launched a preemptive war, as they call it, and they won that again. And then they took control of 100% of it. And they've had it ever since.
What happens in war, though?
Well, I mean, look, it has happened throughout history in war, but no, the entire tradition of modern Western civilization, particularly post-World War II, has been to reject the idea that you can annex territory through war. And again, I'm not saying we didn't do that with the Native Americans. There are other examples that happened a lot earlier when that was more permissible. But I would say that at least recognize that this is the starting point of it. And since 1967, both Gaza and the West Bank have been completely dominated by Israel. And if we're going to pretend like that is not even a factor in why there is this hatred toward Israelis, and no, it's just Islamism, it has nothing to do with the policy of the Israeli government, I think we do that at our own peril.
Gotcha. Laura,
it's
your
Islam.
response.
I will say that we need to have a conversation about Islam. And I just read the charter, and look, the Palestinians have been offered solutions multiple times, and they've rejected them, as you said. You said that yourself that they rejected this resolution in the UN in 1947, and precisely because they're not happy with anything unless it involves the complete eradication of Israel and the Jewish people. And so to say that, oh, we're not going to talk about all of these land disputes and we're just going to make it a conversation about Islam. We're doing it at our own peril. Well, if you read this Hamas charter, and it's so important for people to understand, you can see within Article 8, okay, Article 8 of their own Hamas charter, and I brought this because it is so important for people to understand this amid all of the propaganda, okay? This is what these people believe.
What year was this first written?
1988, you can see for yourself. They say Allah is its target, the Prophet is its model, the Quran its constitution, jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. And again, the very beginning opening statement of the Hamas charter, which majority of the Palestinian people support, okay, it says Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. It doesn't say until Hamas will obliterate it, until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. And so you're not going to, you could give them everything that they wanted. The Israelis have given the Palestinians 97, 98, 99% of the line items that they have requested in all of the peace negotiations. But the one thing that they want that is never included in those negotiations is the complete annihilation of the 15 million Jews left on this planet. And we have to be honest about that. People don't want to talk about it because they want to say not all Muslims. Yeah, maybe not all Muslims because majority of Muslims right here in America have probably never read the Quran, okay? 80% of Muslims on the planet do not speak Arabic, okay? There's a lot of people that will call themselves a Christian, they've never read the Bible. There's a lot of people that will call themselves Muslim, they've never read the Quran. But if you are a true Muslim and one of the 55 majority Muslims in the Muslim majority nations around the world, okay? It is a form of apostasy to call for Islamic reformation or interpretation of Islam. There's no such thing as radical Islam. There's no such thing as moderate Islam. There's Islam. There is Islam, and that's it. And that's it.
As you hear here, I'm going to give you an opportunity to
Sure,
respond.
sure.
But essentially, what you're saying is regarding the Hamas charter, that everyone's out there chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's sort of the essence of what the Hamas charter is.
Yes.
When you hear that, how does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, I don't feel good about that. I think it's crazy. I mean, look, I think if my argument had been that Hamas are not Islamists, that would be a devastating rebuttal. But that's not what my argument is. Now, you can go through the history and repeat. Listen, I'm Jewish, and like my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. My mother lived on a kibbutz in Israel for a long time.
My grandfather was arrested by Nazis in Germany, I know.
I'm well versed in the Israeli propaganda. But the truth is,
This
if
is
you
not
actually
propaganda.
Okay, the truth it is. The truth is that if
This
you
is
actually
their own charter.
Okay, well let me talk for a second.
I am
okay?
letting you talk, but it's not propaganda. I'm
Well,
not going to
you're
let you lie
interrupting me,
and say
so-
that it's propaganda.
No, I'm
this
not
is their
lying.
charter.
What I'm
This
saying
doesn't
is-
come
Guys,
from
let me-
Israel.
let me traffic
I didn't
this for a
say
second.
that
Go
didn't
ahead,
come
Dave.
from Israel. I'm saying the Israeli propaganda is when you say Israel's offered them 98%, 99% of what they want, and they just won't take it. All this time, Israel is dying to give them a state. Like, just on the face of it, doesn't that kind of sound ridiculous?
But they
Israel's
whether it was the Oslo Accords, whether it was
Have you
Yitzhak Rabin.
ever seen Netanyahu's videotape when he didn't know he was being videotaped,
Yes, I
when he
have.
talked about the
Yes.
Oslo Accords? So what did he say? He basically said that he snuck so many poison pills into the Oslo Accord that it was completely unworkable.
But
That
he wasn't part of the Oslo Accord. That was Yitzhak Rabin at the time.
No, he was
wasn't it?
in the government. Yitzhak
Okay.
Rabin was the prime minister.
But he wasn't the prime minister.
But he was talking about how Israel ultimately got to decide what every military zone and danger zone was, and there was never. And then he just defined it as everywhere, as the entire West Bank. They never really made the offer. And if you care to go look into the history of this, you can figure this out. The point isn't that obviously Hamas is a radical Islamist organization. And by the way, just so we're clear on this, Laura, and I'm not denying that there's a problem with radical Islam.
But it's not
Of course-
radical, it's Islam.
Okay, whatever you want to call it. I'm not denying that there's a problem in the Islamic world. I'm not denying, obviously, you could look through the Islam. I'm a libertarian. I believe in natural rights and individual liberty. Obviously, I see problems in the world. However, if you're going to look at this as an American or as somebody who's supporting the Israeli point of view, and you're going to say, well, look at these savages. They're just so barbaric. Does it not give you pause for a moment that Israel, the United States of America, have for decades been intentionally, strategically, and explicitly supporting the most radical elements of Islam? That America has supported Saudi Arabia, the biggest exporter of Wahhabism in the world, that they've funded, armed, and trained Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and that it was, and I noticed this didn't get a response at all, that it was Israeli policy to support, prop up, and fund Hamas.
Okay, so I have a question for you then. Who was propping up radical Islam 1,400 years ago?
Yeah, but
But
okay,
no,
so
but
you don't
answer
want to
the
respond
question.
to what I just said.
I just responded
exactly.
to
And
you.
this is all right,
The
this
United
is what we
States of
do.
America is not
Yes,
1,400 years old.
This is such a
Why don't
cop
we do-
out.
why don't we-
It's such a cop out. Yes, you didn't respond
You
to what I
just
said at all.
You just said
why don't we
that
do
this
this?
is
Hold on, hold on, hold on.
14,000
You just
years.
Why don't you
Okay, fine.
respond to
You
his
just
point
blamed it.
and then
I
ask
just
him the question?
responded. I did
Why don't you
I did
address
just
his point
respond.
and then
Why-
ask your
yeah,
question?
actually address
Go
what I
ahead.
He said, oh, we don't want to think about, the way that these people feel because of wars that have been, inflicted upon them by the United States of America, the war on terror, and,
No, that's not what I'm saying.
but that is kind of the line of thinking that you're
No,
taking,
it's not.
right?
You're not
Like,
responding to what I said.
I just responded.
Why don't you ask her the question?
This existed
and then
long
let-
before
and then
the
you can
United
ask the
States of
question about
America
1400.
implemented
I'll ask the
neocon
question.
foreign policy.
Sure, okay. I'll ask the question very clearly, okay? If you're going to say that radical Islam, or as you call it, just Islam, is this problem, then how do you feel about the fact for the last, let's say, 60 years, the United States of America and Israel has explicitly funded, for stated strategic reasons, the worst elements of radical Islam? Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Wahhabism, and they've said they're doing it for a reason, to undermine their competing, interests in the Muslim world. How do you feel about that? Can you criticize Israel at all? Were they wrong to support Hamas?
I can criticize Israel, but
Were they wrong to support Hamas?
This is an irrelevant question because
You won't
Islam
answer it? You won't say it's wrong to support Hamas. Is it wrong if Iran supports
I have
Hamas?
obviously said that it is wrong to support Hamas, but
So it was wrong when
but the
Israel did
question-
that?
The question doesn't really make any sense because when you think
How
about
does it not make any
you're saying
sense
that the
if
United
Netanyahu was
States, because you're
supporting
saying
the
that the
terrorist
United
group?
Why
States
don't you do
government
this?
is propping up Islam. I'm not denying the fact that our government, we have jihadists on payroll at the FBI. I'm not denying this, but you can't. Your line of thinking and the way that you came to this, came to this argument, Dave, is that you know, when you look at them attacking Israel and you look at the outrage of these people, and I heard your debate with Austin Peterson as well, where you basically said it was an open-air prison, and you said that they're creating, you know, a fresh recruitment program by bombing these people. This has existed for 1,400 years.
No, it hasn't.
Prior to the creation of the United States government. This is an ideological issue.
You dodged my question
I'm
again.
not dodging your question, though. But
it was a very specific question.
Talk about land. Okay, we could talk about U.S. foreign policy. We could talk about the Patriot Act. We could talk about the war on terror. But at the end of the day, this is an ideological issue, and we need to have an honest conversation about Islam.
So with that being said,
I did answer your question.
You make no distinguishment between Islam, people who believe in Allah, and just radical Islamists?
No,
you don't think there's any difference whatsoever?
It says in this charter that the Quran
but this is
their
Hamas's charter, though. This isn't the Quran.
But as I just explained, okay, here in the United States of America, people are brainwashed into thinking, right, because we have the First Amendment and freedom of religion here, people think, oh, that's how people get to practice Islam in all other parts of the world. There's 55 Muslim majority nations, okay? If you live in a Muslim majority nation and you're a Muslim and you call for Islamic reformation, or you say, oh, you know, I don't really like that part about killing Jews, or that part about tossing homosexuals off roofs, or, you know, I don't really like that part about killing Christians, you will be killed. That is a form of apostasy. Pushing for reformed versions of Islam, and I think you'll agree with me here.
Yeah, there's lots of places where that's true.
No, that is the standard in every majority Muslim country.
Here's the point,
and so
Laura.
Americans are not really living in reality, right? Because here in the United States of America, you do have what you call reform Muslims who are able to live here, right? But if they understand that if they were to do that in their own countries where they came from, they would be killed for doing so.
So Laura's absolutely right about this, but like, let's actually live in reality. So absolutely, I mean, look, in Saudi Arabia, it is the shame of the world that you can be, I mean, they'll cut your arm off for stealing, they execute people for being openly gay, I mean, they do things that are just horrific. All I'm saying here is that, like, I'm fine with judging them, but when you're gonna sit here as an American, a country that our government has maybe 100,000 times as much power as the entire Muslim world combined. I mean, we literally here in the United States of America, our president can make a decision, if they wanted to, and any one of these Muslim countries doesn't exist anymore. That's it. Now, I'm not saying we've done that. We haven't nuked them. We'll just overthrow their government. But I'm saying, like, we'll just march in and kill 1 million of them and then overthrow their government or whatever. But if they wanted to, they can snap their fingers and that country no longer exists. That's the power imbalance here. And with that power, we have propped up the Saudis since the 1970s. So I'm fine with, like, hey, if you want to sit here and you want to judge other people, look, if we were a perfectly free, moral society, I'd be fine with us very sharply criticizing these other countries who just don't have freedom like we have.
Well, it seems like under Joe Biden, these countries are doing just well. I mean, he just allocated another $10 billion of funding to the Iranians today. And as we know from reports that have even been confirmed by the Wall Street Journal,
that was outrageous,
shortly after,
right?
Yeah, it was. And so you want to talk about the United States government?
Sure.
Let's talk about it, right?
Well,
Let's talk about how
if
today
that's
the
outrageous,
Biden administration, we want to talk about an
how about your boy giving billions to the Saudis? Was that okay?
You're not going to get me to defend the Saudis. You're not
but how
going to
about
get
Trump?
me to.
But you won't criticize Trump for doing tens of billions of dollars worth of business with them.
No, I did criticize it. I did criticize it when President Trump was in the White House.
Okay.
And this is one of the reasons why I didn't receive the endorsement when I first ran, because I was demonized by the GOP because of my hardline stance on Islam, and this is why I got banned on all social media.
Good for you. Good for you if that's the case.
This is the hill that I'm willing to die on.
But do you understand then? But here, isn't this kind of interesting, right? Well, let me just make this point.
One point for you, David, then we're going to a video. But go ahead.
But as much as you kind of criticized the Palestinians, because look at this opinion poll, they support Hamas. But when we're talking about the most radical element in Islam, which is Saudi Arabia, you are actively campaigning for a man who poured in tens of billions of dollars to that country. So what responsibility do you face for that? Do you face for propping up the most radical form of Islam?
I'm not personally propping up the most radical
No,
form
you're just
of
voting
Islam.
for the person. No, you're just voting for the guy who does it.
President Trump, okay, President Trump.
See, it's not fair
President
anymore.
Trump
It's not fair anymore to blame you for
No,
that.
he obliterated ISIS. He carried out the execution of Qasem Soleimani, okay? And speaking of relations between the Israelis and the
that's not what I said,
Palestinians,
but okay.
President Trump had his historic Abraham Accords and his Peace Through Prosperity program, which, he was trying to implement before the election was stolen, of course, was going to offer financial incentives to the Palestinians because under the Obama administration, prior to President Trump, our government was sending millions of dollars of aid to the Palestinians every single year until, we were able to introduce the Taylor-Force Act, which prohibited the allocation of funds to the family members of what they like to call the martyrs. And so did you know that the United States government was sending millions of dollars of aid to the Palestinians, okay, under the Obama administration,
and billions to the
Israelis. And every single time, one of these jihadists would either murder an American citizen or an Israeli, mostly just a Jew, because let's be honest, that's what they're targeting. They didn't care if they were American Jews or Israeli Jews, because in the case of Taylor Force, who was an American, right, he was murdered, he was Jewish. They pay their family members. And so I'm not going to sit here and allow you to, try to demonize the Pay for Slay program, try to demonize President Trump when President Trump, he was probably the most anti-Islamic terror, the most effective president we've ever had when it comes to combating Islamic terrorism.
Well, I'll tell you,
I will say that. And so it's not really nice of you to say that about President Trump because
fine. I don't
he
care.
obliterated, he ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani.
It was a terrible decision. But
it wasn't a terrible decision.
Okay, listen, the thing is here is that I'm not a partisan and you are, so there's an asymmetry here where you're saying, well, Obama did this, but Trump, Obama was terrible. And the worst thing that Obama did in his foreign policy was that he funded and backed Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, Libya, and Yemen. And to Trump's great credit, when Trump first came in, one of the first things he did, and it was one of the best things he did in his administration, was he ended the CIA program to back all the anti-Assad rebels in Syria. And this is what opened the door for ISIS to be destroyed, which, by the way, a lot of that was also Assad and Vladimir Putin. But I'll give Trump credit. He took part in some of that as well. But I really give him credit for ending that CIA program. But you know what he continued to do through every single day of his administration was continue Obama's war in Yemen on the side of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So I'm just here where I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, so I can just criticize both of them.
I don't like either party. I can't stand the Republican Party. I can't stand the Democrats. I'm only registered as a Republican.
So guys, hold on. Let's
I support President Trump, who is hated by the Republican Party.
Give me a second.
If you haven't noticed. But I want to add this too. The reason why President Trump had relations as well with Saudi Arabia is because it was a pivotal part of the Abraham Accords as well. And this is one of the reasons why Iran, trained the Hamas and Hezbollah operatives to further destabilize peaceful relations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, because Iran knows that if they were able to, have Saudi Arabia help normalize and be on board with normalized relations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, then it would be a problem.
Yeah, if you got to support a genocide in Yemen, if you got to support a genocide in Yemen in order to get Saudi Arabia to be friends with Israel, that's a good deal, I guess.
You're condemning the attacks on Palestinians, but at the end of the day, President Trump had relations with Saudi Arabia to try to reduce the killing of both Israelis and Palestinians.
No, they say the enemy of the enemy is my friend, and that obviously everyone is going against Iran.
After Joe Biden allocated $6 billion.
Here's what we want to do right now, Laura. Excuse me. Here's what we want to do right now. We've gone pretty wide on a range of topics. Let's kind of steer this back into specifically Israel-Palestine. We're going to roll a video from October 7th just to kind of, so people understand exactly what happened that day. We'll let you comment on the other side. So obviously October 7th, over 1,200 Israeli civilians, for the most part, were killed by the hands of Hamas. The most Jews killed since the Holocaust. Let's roll a video of that. Do we have that here?
Oh, we don't have audio.
חמישה הרוגים. יש פה מישהו. יש לי פה שוטרת. יש לי שוטרת הרוגה פה.
I mean, I see it here, but I can't hear it.
Oh, I'm pretty sure they're speaking Arabic.
I'm fluent. I understand.
Gotcha.
מישהו עם סימן חיים. שום סימן חיים? לא. היא מתה. היא מתה. היא מתה.
So a lot of these images were specifically from the music festival that famously hundreds of just innocent partygoers, actually partying in the name of peace, ironically enough, sadly enough, were killed, were slaughtered at the hands of Hamas. So when you see images of this, which you've seen countless videos like this, what say you?
I mean, I don't know. What do you say to something like that? I think if any decent person should just be horrified. It's appalling. So I'd say, like, my first thought is that this is horrific and that anybody who did this ought to pay for it. And then I would say that my second thought after that, kind of processing it, is I just go, my God, like, what the punishment, first what the punishment for anyone who perpetrated this should be, but then what the punishment for Benjamin Netanyahu to be the longest serving prime minister of Israel and embark in an explicit policy to prop up Hamas for strategic reasons. And if you haven't looked into this, by the way, this may sound like conspiracy theory for people who don't like follow this stuff and know, but this is in the front pages of Haaretz and the Times of Jerusalem just in the last couple of weeks.
Why don't you clarify exactly what you mean by Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister? I think he's on his fifth term right now.
He openly
advocating for Hamas.
Supported Hamas, and the reason he did is because even though when Benjamin Netanyahu...
But where's your source on this? What's the source? Because
well, I gave you two just there, but his direct quotes in front of the Likud party. This is just a fact. Do you not know this?
No, I'm just asking what the source is because we have a lot of
well, I just
people
gave you
watching
two.
this.
Haaretz and the Times of Jerusalem from the last couple weeks, okay? So those are two sources on it, but I could also just send you his quotes in front of Likud party members. Now, when Benjamin, this is just a fact. If you don't know it, you don't know it, but go look it up, and I promise you, Twitter will inundate you with
I'm just asking because we have a lot of people watching.
The first sentence I said was giving you sources on this.
But go ahead.
So what he said, even though when he comes over to America, when he's asking for billions in our taxpayer money, he says he supports a two-state solution somewhere in the future. But when he's talking to his own Likud party members, what he says is the reason we must support Hamas is because we're against the Palestinians ever having a state. And so you could say, first, there were two basic strategies, right? One was to divide the Palestinians in the West Bank versus the Palestinians in Gaza. And number two, which you could understand, Adam, right? If you're the international community, sure, if there's a secular nationalist group who asks for statehood, maybe you listen to them in Palestine. But Hamas? Are you ever going to recognize, you're the United Nations. Are you ever going to recognize Hamas as a legitimate government? Of course not. And so they supported them. And Benjamin Netanyahu's exact words were, we can control the height of the flame. So he said, we'll support this radical terrorist group taking over, but we'll make sure it doesn't burn too high. And then the group he supported, he failed to protect his own people from. I think he should face public trial, spend the rest of his days in Gaza.
When you say support, how did he actively support them?
He directed funds toward them, propped them up, withheld funds from the PLO.
Look, you can't have it both ways, okay?
He said it openly.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't say, these poor Palestinians and the Israelis are cutting off aid, and then also demonize him for giving aid. Hamas is the elected, the elected body in Gaza, okay? I already showed you, and I can give you the citation for these polls, and you can look them up yourself. These are Palestinian polls that show majority of the Palestinians support Hamas. They control. To this day. And if they were to have their elections today, they would prefer Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, over Mahmoud Abbas. And so the fact of the matter is that when you go to the Karem Shalom aid distribution center, and I have been there, okay, on the border of Gaza. Well, who controls the flow of aid once it's given by the Israelis? It's Hamas. Hamas controls the distribution of the aid. They control the fuel. They control the water. And so this is another ridiculous lie that the pro-Palestinian crowd likes to say, Israel cut the water off. Okay, there's 2 desalination units in Gaza. It's completely controlled. Both of them are controlled by Hamas. Do you know how much of the water supply that goes into Gaza is actually controlled by Israel? Do you know?
7%, something like that.
It's about 9%.
Something like that.
Okay, and so when we want to talk about resources and electricity and fuel, but let me finish. Fuel and water being cut off to the Palestinian people, I agree with you that the Palestinian people are an occupied people. And they're occupied by Hamas. They're not occupied by Israel. They are occupied by Hamas. And so if you're upset, if you're one of these people that's saying free Palestine in the streets of America or Europe or all around the world where we're seeing these, And I'll say they're not exactly organic protests, okay? Just 2 weeks ago, there was an investigative report that was released, I believe it was by the Washington Examiner, if I'm not mistaken, and one of the largest shell companies and organizations that the Democrats use for the sake of, I'll say, laundering their funds and laundering money to progressive leftist organizations that falsely identify themselves as 501c3 organizations and actually are, violating IRS tax structure and engaging in partisan political activities, okay? They were found to be supporting Palestinian terrorist initiatives. This was such a scandal. And then Arabella Advisors goes, and this is one of the funds, by the way, that George Soros heavily funds, says, oh, well, we didn't know about it, and so we're going to discontinue our relationship with them. Bull crap. They got caught. Okay, so these are not organic protests. You're not going to get that 10,000 people on London Bridge with matching T-shirts and signs and tell me that that's organic.
Oh, by the way, I was at that protest unintentionally. I just happened to be in London at the time, and I walked through it. Awkward place to be a Jew. Anyway,
you were there? No, really?
No, I'm dead serious. I was just doing a stand-up tour, and me and my buddy Rob were just walking through London.
So what happened? What was it like?
It was, we just kind of walked through it and walked away. It was fine. But
this was how long ago?
This was a couple weeks ago. I have to check my website. It may not have been the biggest protest, but we walked through a huge. It wasn't the one with the picture on London Bridge, but we walked over London Bridge, and then you got there. And
what was that like?
Was it the one where they were waving the Hamas and the Taliban flags?
No, it was just. I'll be honest, and this is. Being Jewish and out of the country, I didn't stick around to find out too much, but I just saw a bunch of Palestinian flags, and there were like a whole bunch, like 50,000 maybe of them or something, and then we were like, all right, let's go, go get some lunch.
I know you were being funny and facetious. Why didn't you stick around and hang out with the Palestinian Hamas crowd?
To be honest, I don't like protests. Even if I agree with the protest, I just don't like it.
Did you agree with the protest, though? Did you agree with the protest?
Well, my guess would be that I disagree with many people.
Let's deal with the factual claim first because it's specific and checkable. Loomer cited a poll suggesting a majority of Palestinians would elect Ismail Haniyeh as Hamas's leader. Haniyeh was killed in an airstrike in Tehran in July of 2024, which means citing a current poll about voters choosing him as a present leader doesn't hold up, since he hasn't been in a position to lead anything for roughly 2 years. If that specific detail is accurate, it's a real problem with how that particular statistic was used in the moment, regardless of whatever underlying poll data might exist about Palestinian public opinion more broadly. But here's the more important point. Even setting that error aside entirely, Dave Smith's actual argument doesn't depend on any polling number at all. His point was about consistency of standards. Elected American governments launched or backed a string of major conflicts over the past 2 decades. Iraq, Afghanistan, the intervention in Libya, the push for regime change in Syria, and support for the Saudi-led campaign in Yemen. Independent estimates place the death tolls from the Syrian civil war and the Yemen conflict each in the hundreds of thousands, and combined with Iraq and Afghanistan, the total civilian toll tied to decisions made by elected American governments runs into the millions. Those are widely cited figures from independent monitoring groups, though exact numbers vary by source and methodology. So it's worth checking current estimates directly if you want to cite them precisely. The actual philosophical question Smith raised is the one that matters here. If a population's choice of government is what justifies collective punishment of that population's civilians, that standard has to apply everywhere it logically extends, not just to the conflict currently being discussed. Loomer's response pivoted to a different topic rather than engaging directly with whether that same standard, if it's a real standard, would make American civilians fair targets given their own elected government's actions abroad. That's worth naming as a real gap in the argument, independent of the polling mistake, because a principle that only gets applied in one direction isn't really a principle. It's a justification built for a single case. To be fair to the broader debate here, this doesn't resolve the underlying, genuinely difficult question of what responsibility, if any, a civilian population bears for the actions of a government it didn't necessarily choose freely or can't easily remove. That's a real question in political philosophy that serious people continue to disagree about. But testing whether a given standard survives being applied evenly across different countries and different conflicts is a fair and useful way to stress test it, regardless of where you land on the conflict specifically being discussed. So tell me, do you think your government's actions make your civilians accountable standard can ever be applied consistently across different nations, or does it inevitably become selective depending on which country is being discussed? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these breakdowns that separate the real argument from the shaky citation, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.